The big feature in Astro 3.0 that everyone is talking about is the view transitions. Now, there's a good reason for that. Look at this amazing app by Maxi Ferrara. At least I think that's how you say his name. He's done several really cool tutorials, and he's a great follow on Twitter, so I'd suggest you check him out. But you can see that not only does this feel like a single page app and how it looks, that is that you've got DOM elements actually kind of smoothly moving between different routes, but it's actually passing data. Notice that even this audio, as it plays, it just kind of continues as you move back and forth between routes. So is this a single page app? Not quite. It's a multi-page app using view transitions. Now, the View Transitions API is available in Chromium browsers, but Astro has some really smart fallbacks for browsers that don't yet support it. What we're going to do in this video is kind of walk through the basics, first of all, of view transitions. Secondly, we're going to talk about 3 different controls you can use for it. Thirdly, we're going to talk about handling state. How do you maintain state between routes? And then finally and fourthly, we're going to talk about customizations. Okay, you ready? Let's jump in. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in with the very first thing, which is adding a very basic view transition. All I need to do is to find a common head that's shared between different routes, and in this case, I'm using the same layout for both the blog post, which I'll show you in a second right here, and the homepage. All I have to do then is come in here and add the view transitions component that I get from Astro, and that should have imported using the Astro extension, and it does. And then I'll save it, and immediately what you're going to see is as I move, it just kind of fades back and forth. Now, there's actually more going on underneath the hood. We'll look at this in a second, but if you look really carefully here, as I go back to the home page, you'll see that I actually get this view transitions pseudo element that wraps the whole page. We'll look at that in a second. All right, so back over this way, that's the very basics. Now, secondly, we said we were going to talk about 3 controls, and this will take a little bit more time to go through, but what you can do is actually give Astro more direction with these controls. The first thing I want to do is name different elements. So we've got this image here. If I come over here, this same image is right here. So if we give these things the exact same name, then basically they will fade between and kind of morph in a smart way. So let's come to the index page, which is this home page. I've got the image right here, and we can just give this a transition name, and it just needs to be unique. So for right now, I'm just going to call it image like that. And just to note that it needs to be like kebab case or something that CSS can accept, because basically all this is doing behind the scenes is adding like a view transitions. I think it's actually like this, transitions, transition name and CSS, and then whatever name you give it right here. So it has to be something that CSS can accept. All right, so Astro gives us this little helper just so we don't have to remember the CSS or kind of think about CSS. We're just going to give it this, and it will attach it to the DOM element as a CSS property. So you've got to do the same thing over here as well. This is the image in our post, and I'm just going to drop that in as well. Now, just by doing that, by giving it a name on each route that shares the exact same unique name, when I come over here, it'll now smart morph between them. And again, this already starts to feel very much like an app. Now, it is feeling like an app, but it's only feeling like an app right now for the client as it kind of moves back and forth. So let's do a little bit more on the client work with the second control, which is about animation. Let's come back to the layout. What I'm going to do is actually come to the body here, and I'm going to add a transition animate. And we've got a couple different values we can choose from, but I'm going to choose none. So I'm going to say don't animate anything. Now what you're going to see is everything else on the page is going to just snap to the new route, except for this right here. It'll actually morph because things lower down essentially can overwrite the upper kind of wrapper right here. So if I come inside here, you're going to see everything else snaps, but that fades over. So what I want to do then is just on the body, which is right here. So everything that's kind of down this way is in the slot for each of these routes. And all I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to say transition animate. And here we're going to say slide. Now, as I come over here, you're going to see that everything else slides left and right. If I'm going forwards, it goes that way. If I'm going backwards, it goes this way. So it kind of switches back and forth as if it's like a slide deck moving one way or the other. And again, this still kind of overrides it because it's further down. So as a child, it has a little bit more control than the parent wrapper. Now, right now it feels very much like an app for the client, but it doesn't yet feel like an app when it comes to a developer. Because you know what we haven't done yet is actually pass state. And that's the other thing about single page apps that most people really like is you can pass state back and forth between different routes. Right now, it feels like a multi-page app from the developer standpoint. So let's kind of fuzz up that line a little bit between single page app and multi-page app a little bit more. You're going to notice here, if I refresh, I can come over here and toggle this light and dark mode. Now my system is in light mode, but if I go to like this blog post, you're going to notice something, and that is that it goes back to light mode. Why is that? Well, this is actually all happening right here in this script tag. And by default, Astro makes all these script tags modules, so they only ever run once on an initial page load, and then after that, this whole kind of soft transition back and forth, they will not run each and every time. So how can we get this to work? Well, there's a couple things we need to think about. First of all, if I come over here, you'll notice I can't actually click this again, because again, this event listener has already run, and it basically won't run again unless I tell it to kind of persist all of that data, including all the query selectors and everything associated with this element. So what I'm going to do is wrap everything that I want to be transition persist up top here. So let's come to the nav itself, and I'm just going to say transition persist. Now, as soon as I do that, I'm going to come over here. You'll notice that it starts to work automatically. And if I come over here, it hasn't yet fixed the theme. We'll get into that in a second, but I should be able to now click this back and forth, and it actually works for me. So let's come over here and do the same. And now the button is actually working because I've told everything in this nav, hey, carry all the data that's associated with this, including any JavaScript state or event listeners, just carry that over each route and basically pass that along. So that's one thing we took care of, but the other problem here is that if I come over here and change this to dark mode and then change routes, it's still going back to light mode. Why is that happening? Well, this right here, the only way we're kind of figuring out what to show each time is with this window event listener that's waiting for the DOM content to be loaded. Well, this only ever happens now on initial page load, and after that, there's kind of this soft transition between routes. So we actually need to run another event listener. And all I'm going to do is copy this down. We'll change this out for the document because that's where this is attached in Astro. And then we'll change this out to an Astro after swap. We'll talk through this in just a moment, but now you're going to see if I go back and forth between the blog post and the home page, now it's basically running this as well, just like it does if I come for the first time to any page on my site. So passing data back and forth requires thinking about JavaScript a little bit differently. Because JavaScript is only executed, especially module JavaScript is only executed once on initial page load, I need to actually figure out if I need it to run again, and if so, run it this way. And again, you can pass along data like event listeners and anything else connected to that JavaScript right here with transition persist. And that allowed us to start toggling this, but again, actually loading the theme from our local storage needs to happen each time to make sure that we stick with whatever the user's preference is and not the default for the machine at that moment. All right, so third, let's talk more about maintaining state. We've kind of already leaked into this third step, but what I want to do is now walk through kind of a step-by-step pattern of how this works. So I'm going to come over this way. I've got a little document that I created here that I hope will be a help to you. Basically, this is all the client ever sees. This is the only thing visible in the client is they click and then all this stuff happens. Stuff animates and then all this happens. And we'll talk through this in a second. But what's actually happening? Well, if you look at the docs, and this is my understanding, I've kind of filled in a couple of the gaps that they left here. When you click a link to another route on your site, a new page is fetched. It goes to the server, and the server then adds to the HTML tag this data Astro transition, either forward or backwards. That's how it knows kind of which way to slide. Now, this is added, as I understand it, to the old page right over here, and maybe it's added to the new page too. I wasn't totally clear on that, and I couldn't see it because it happens kind of behind the scenes. So this is all the kind of hidden stuff over here. Secondly, this document.startViewTransition fires. Now, this is only available in Chromium browsers right now, so they actually have a fallback if this does not exist, where they kind of do some magic stuff on their end, and we'll look at that in a second. Now, after that happens, a bunch of swaps happen. There's a bunch of swaps in the head item. So for instance here, if there's any shared style sheet DOM nodes, they stay between the old and the new route. Same thing with shared scripts. They stay if they're in the head, and then also shared transition persists stay if they're in the head as well. Then the body is replaced. And again, anything with transition persist in the body, it stays as an element along with all of its attached like information in JavaScript. Third, the scroll position is restored. So here you can see, like, if I was halfway down this page, it should actually make sure it stays at that exact same place. And then the Astro after swap fires on the document. That's what we just used a moment ago. Now, we used that to basically check the local storage for the right theme and make sure that it can update all that. So that's what it's doing right here. Sixth, then it waits. All right, so now that it's done all that swapping, it also looks into the new document head and says, hey, are there any new style sheets or any new scripts that I need to load before I show something to the client? So all these steps, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 happen kind of behind the scenes. Then finally, once all that is loaded, here's what it does. It then swaps out the new document. It animates between common elements. So for instance, right here, I'm using these colors to represent different names. So these would be named the same things, and these would be named the same things, and this would be named the same things. So it would animate between all those. Everything else fades, or however else you set up your document, and then the Astro page load fires. Now, this page load is a little bit interesting, and I want to show you some of the documentation they have on this. So if I go all the way down here to page load, You see right here that this fires after the end of the page navigation, just like we just saw. So after the page is visible, basically after the DOM content has loaded on this soft navigation. And the interesting thing here is it also runs on initial page load. So just like an MPA app, it'll actually run like DOM content loaded as well. So you can use this to run code on every page navigation, or you can also say, hey, I only want this to run once, just like any event listener. So as I understand this, we could have used this Astro page load as well. The only difference would be if my machine is not in the same system, it's going to first load and then it will run the script. So we might have flashing back and forth of that color, but it would actually work if we wanted it to work that way. And just to note that if you have inline scripts like this, you need to actually check to make sure that they're not going to clash with something you already have on the window object, because all of this, not being a module, will run every single time no matter what. So the other way we could have fixed this, as I understand it, is make this an inline script, and that would have run every time no matter what, but it would have had that slight flash if it wasn't the same color theme as the user's system preference, whatever they chose for my actual website. If that doesn't make sense, hopefully reading through some of this documentation will help. So we've talked about the basic view transitions. We've talked about the 3 controls, adding a name, animation, and also the persist. I should mention real briefly before we move on, if with that persists, so let's come up top here. If, for instance, I wanted to navigate this nav itself, I could give a name here. I could say like navigation or something like this. And that would be the same as basically saying transition name navigation. All right, so if you add both of those, basically this right here is the shorthand for what I just showed you. So just so you know, you can actually combine those if you want to kind of compress what you're writing. Thirdly, we got to look at maintaining state. We even looked at these toggles right here. So I can toggle this back and forth, and then it actually handles all this with the after swap event right here. Fourthly, then let's talk about customizations. You may actually have a link on your site that you don't want to go somewhere. So if I come over here, you're going to notice right here, this is a secret post to a PDF document. Now it's in my public directory, but this is not what I'm expecting. Why is this happening? Well, it's because that transition is happening on every single route on my site. Now I don't want it to happen to something that doesn't have this common head. And so you can see that now it's trying to load that within the script of my other body and kind of messing everything up. If I come over here and right inside here, you're going to see this is what I'm loading from my public directory, and Astro doesn't touch anything inside of here. So what I can do instead, if I come back to my index page and I come all the way down here, I can add something else down here. So that would just be the data Astro reload. Now in this case, this is a card component. So if I click over here, nothing is actually going to change. It'll do the same thing. I need to add this to the link itself, but just to say, generally speaking, you would add it that way. I'd probably add it to the card and then have this as a toggle on the actual link. So here's where we need to add it. But if I do that, it'll actually mess this one up too. So if I come over here now, this will actually open up the PDF, which is what I want. However, if I come over here and click on this, now I don't get all that smooth transition. So I'd probably have a toggle here that then would set this as data Astro reload or not, depending on whether or not I wanted that to be the case. So just a note about how that would work. So that's one customization. A second customization has to do with custom animations. So let's come back up top here. And let's say that here for, let's go back to the layout. Here, this animate none. Maybe I say, hey, I want to animate it. I just want to kind of change the default animation. So let's come over here. They give you a bunch of different options here. We won't go through every single one. I'll let you kind of comb through the documentation as you want. But you can see here that you can just give it a different name. We've already done that. But you can also provide like a special fade or duration or whatever in this case. So I'm going to come in here and do that. And you'll notice what I'm doing is actually grabbing the fade from the Astro transitions. So I need to come up top here and grab a fade right here, and then it should work down this way. And now if I save it and come back over here, you'll notice not a huge difference actually because the way I set this up, but this won't fade in the same way or it'll change its duration. All right, so that's one way you can alter this by taking an existing animation and basically augmenting it. Now, if you want to know what you can change, on each of these transition animations, there's a name, a delay, a duration, an easing, a fill mode, and a direction. All right, so this is something the browser does behind the scenes using the View Transitions API that's experimental in browsers, but hopefully coming to all soon. If you want to actually add a pair of transition animations, here you would have an old and a new property that each have a transition animation on them. And if you want to give directional animation, so if you're going forward or backwards a page like we saw with that sliding, then you would actually add them like this. So forwards would point to all of this, and backwards would point to all of this, which would then in turn point to this. How does that look in practice? Well, we won't do it all here, but you can see that what I'm doing is giving it a custom animation that's right here, and I'm assigning it forwards and backgrounds. Each of these are pointing to this custom animation that has these two properties, old and new, on them. And then they each have any of the ones that we looked at earlier. You don't have to include them all. If you're not used to TypeScript, that's what these question marks mean. The only one you have to give it is some kind of name. And you can see they've given it a name of fade in, and then they give a duration, easing, and fill mode. So that's how you would set up your own custom animations if you want to. Honestly, I really like the morph that just kind of moves between pages. You can do that with images. You can do that with text as long as they share the same exact unique name. Now, like I mentioned, not every single browser supports the view transition API in JavaScript. So you can actually give it a fallback. Let's come back up top here to my common head. And in here, I can just give this fallback. It has by default the animate right here, but you can change that if you want to say, hey, I don't want to fall back for Safari or other browsers that don't currently support this, or you can say swap. They really strongly recommend keeping this on animate, but just to note, you can change it if you don't like how it looks in Safari. Honestly, if it doesn't work, then they just get what they expect anyhow, which is a full page transition. And if they're in a Chromium browser, they would get this enhanced experience, but they do a pretty good job of making this fallback work. All right, the last thing I want to share about view transitions is that it prefers reduced motion automatically. So I think that's down here somewhere. Yeah, right here. So if somebody prefers reduced motion on, it simply swaps the DOM elements and it doesn't do any kind of animation. So they've kind of thought through that use case so that you don't have to worry about it yourself. Lastly, I'll remind you of an announcement I made yesterday, and that is that I'm launching an Astro course. I've been building Astro sites since the early betas, and I'm excited to share this in a platform that I can actually update as Astro updates. If you're interested in seeing that early release and then 50% off the final price, go ahead and sign up with the link in the description at learnastro.dev. Now, tomorrow I've got a video coming out on the image optimization feature available in Astro 3.0, so make sure you subscribe if you don't want to miss that. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.